One of the biggest reasons clinicians burn out has nothing to do with time management. It's that clinical work is what I call open loop work. Your brain never gets a clear signal that the workday is finished. You can work a completely full day, leave the building, and your brain is still running through notes, emails, documentation, something that happened in a session, and what you need to do tomorrow. In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 types of open loops that keep clinicians mentally at work long after the workday ends, and how to close those loops so you can actually leave work at the office. When your brain is still running through work after you leave, it's easy to assume that you're behind. You might tell yourself, if I were more organized, if I worked faster, or if I just stayed a little later, then you'd be caught up and the day would finally feel finished. But that's usually not the real problem. What's actually happening is that your brain is tracking open loops. An open loop is anything your brain believes is unfinished. And when something feels unfinished, your brain keeps it mentally active so it doesn't get forgotten. Clinical work creates a lot of those. And most of them fall into 3 types of open loops. And the third one is the one most clinicians don't even realize they're carrying, but it may be the biggest reason that your brain stays mentally at work at night. But let's start with the first type. These are administrative open loops, the tasks that didn't get finished before the end of the day. If you're like most clinicians, you know exactly what these look like. The notes that you didn't get to, the email that you meant to respond to, the documentation you told yourself you'd finish later. When you leave work with those still hanging out there, your brain keeps them on its radar so they don't get forgotten. Most clinicians assume that the solution is just finishing more work before leaving for the day. But that's not usually realistic. Clinical days run long, something unexpected happens, a session goes over. So instead of trying to finish everything, the real goal is something different. The goal is to close the loop in your brain, even if the task itself isn't finished yet. One simple way to do that is to decide exactly when the task will happen, not just saying you'll do it tomorrow, but something specific like I'm going to finish today's notes tomorrow morning at 8:30. Your brain doesn't actually need the work to be finished. It just needs to know when it's going to be handled. Once a task has a clear place and time, your brain usually stops trying to keep it active. And since you're scheduling the task anyway, leave yourself a clear starting point. This part isn't about closing the loop at night necessarily. It just makes the task much easier to restart when you come back to it. Leave a short prompt that tells your future self exactly where to begin. When your brain knows when the work will happen, it's much more willing to let that loop close for the night. Administrative loops are usually the easiest ones to see, but they're not the only loops clinicians carry home. Clinical work isn't just administrative work, it's also emotional work. Sometimes a session ends, but part of your brain is still processing it hours later. You might find yourself thinking about something that a client said, replaying a moment in your head, or wondering what you should try differently next time. That's an emotional loop. The work itself may be finished, but your brain hasn't fully let go of it yet. Most clinicians were never really taught how to close this kind of loop, so the brain keeps turning it over. One way to help your brain close this loop is to give the day a clear ending point. Before you leave, ask yourself a few quick questions. What felt hard today? What did I do that helped? And what problem is not mine to solve? Closure doesn't mean the situation is solved. It just means your brain knows it can stop working on it for now. And when your brain gets that signal, it's much easier for the emotional part of the day to stay at the office where it belongs. But there's a third kind of open loop that many clinicians carry home without even realizing it because it doesn't look like unfinished work and it doesn't always feel emotional. It just feels like your brain is still thinking about work, trying to figure something out. Maybe you're thinking about what to try with a client next, or how you're going to respond to a parent email, or whether something that happened today needs follow up tomorrow. Nothing actually needs to be done tonight, but your brain keeps working on it anyway. That's what I call a decision open loop. It's where your brain is still holding a question it hasn't answered yet. And when a question stays open, your brain keeps returning to it, trying to land the decision. The way to close this loop isn't by solving the entire situation, it's deciding the next move. For example, instead of leaving the question as, what should I do with that client? You might decide that tomorrow I'm going to review their last two sessions and choose the next intervention for them. You haven't solved the whole situation. You haven't figured out what you're doing with them, but you've given your brain a clear next step. And once that next step exists, the loop usually stops showing up in your head at night. So by the end of a typical clinical day, you might be carrying three different types of open loops: administrative loops, those unfinished tasks; emotional loops, the parts of the work your brain is still processing; and decision loops, the questions your brain is still trying to resolve. When those loops stay open, the workday never really feels finished. That's why you can leave the office after a completely full day and still feel like part of your brain is mentally there, because those loops never got a clear signal that they were contained somewhere. The first step is to changing that is simply being able to see what's still open. Most of the time, those loops are all mixed together in your head: unfinished tasks, situations that you're still thinking about, and decisions that you haven't made yet. So I put together a short tool that helps you identify the open loops and patterns that keep you working mentally active after the day ends. It walks you through a few simple questions so you can see where work is still following you home and where you can start closing those loops. You can find that resource in the description, because the goal isn't to finish everything before you leave. The goal is to make sure your brain knows the day is allowed to end. I'm Amelia Delphonse, and it's time to master your week.